It's been exactly a month ever since the horrific terror attack in southern Israel, which killed more than 1,500 innocent people. And in fact, we have been seeing and witnessing Israel responding to the Hamas terror attacks and continuously using airstrikes and also the ground invasion or the ground attacks that are continuing against the hideouts. What's the plan of action for Israel from here, both diplomatically and militarily? Joining us is Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, who is the international spokesperson currently of the IDF. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for joining us. I want to begin by asking you, it's exactly a month, as an Israeli, yourself, what's going through your mind right now? We'll discuss the optics of it. We'll discuss the, militarily what's happening there. But as a Jew, as an Israeli citizen, on the first month completion of this horrific terror attack, your first words.
Yes, hello, Aditya, and thank you for having me on your show. 30 days has special significance in Jewish religion and heritage, because after 30 days, when someone has been buried for 30 days, there's a special memorial service, and usually we go and uncover the grave, and usually we put a tombstone after 30 days. So it's it's of significance not only because it's a month, but also there's the additional layer of tradition here in religion. Listen, on a personal human level, I think that we are in a situation where the country is reeling with pain, with anguish, with fear, where people today, there are 250,000 Israelis that are internally displaced persons. I know that in Indian comparison, those numbers are very, very small, but in Israel, that's a big percentage of the people. And we have dozens of communities in southern Israel and in northern Israel that have been evacuated due to the threat of terrorists, Hamas in the south and Hezbollah from Lebanon in the north. And there's tremendous strain on the entire system here. But most importantly, it's the sense that many Israelis feel afraid. They feel that the system didn't work, and that they were let down, and that the IDF failed. And I want to start with that. Yes, the IDF did not deliver, and it's a terrible, terrible thing for me to try to represent an organization that I am extremely proud to be a part of, but we didn't deliver, and Israelis were killed because of that. And it's a very difficult starting point for any military, and I don't wish the Indian military or any other friendly military to have to start fighting from such a low point where so many civilians were butchered and more than 240 were taken hostage and are now still being held inside Gaza. So it's difficult times, but I am encouraged and happy to see the resolve of Israeli troops, regular and reserves. I am strengthened to see the coming together of different parts of Israeli society, rallying around the mission, rallying around what everybody understands that needs to be done. Civil society coming together, bridging differences and petty political nonsense that consumed discourse in Israel for many years, for many months, sorry. They are now set aside, hopefully, for entirety, and people are focusing on the positive and what needs to be done, because we have tremendous challenges on the ground. Hamas is a formidable enemy. They have had the better part of 20 years to prepare the underground infrastructure and to allocate weapons and to conduct training, and basically to focus all of their energy, most of their energy, instead of producing a future for the people of Gaza, they have been preparing in order to end our future. And there's just so many people that haven't been listening to what they've been saying. Now I think we're listening. Now is time for action.
The question really is about the ground assault that's been happening for the last many days. In fact, I was reading the statements from the IDF, which clearly indicated that the IDF has encircled the Gaza city, the coastline, and a lot of horrific realities are coming out of the Hamas using civilians as human shield in many cases, often hospitals, children's playgrounds, Boy Scouts places being used as rocket launch sites. What could you tell us that the IDF troops that have gone there? What are the initial impressions that they are really picking up? And what is your end objective finally in Gaza?
There are many things in common between Israel and India. We are democracies fighting jihadi forces. And usually, jihadi forces, wherever they are around the world, have extremely little respect for the sanctity of life and total disrespect for the laws of armed conflict and basically moral conduct during war. We are committed to fight according to the laws of armed conflict. We are committed to conduct ourselves according to the Geneva Convention. We think that is the right thing to do. Even war has rules, and rules should be obeyed, and we fight accordingly. What we find on the ground is a reality where the absurd reality, where it appears as if we care more and we spend more resources, time, and effort in taking care of not hitting Palestinian civilians than what Hamas does. And actually, even more than that, not only doesn't Hamas care at all for the civilian population under its control, but they're also using them, and they're using civilian infrastructure. They're using locations that are supposed to have special protection under the Geneva Convention and humanitarian law, like hospitals, schools, mosques, UN facilities, medical centers, etc. All of those are being abused, and we're just not surprised anymore to see launch pits of rockets that are immediately or very close to the compounds of hospitals, fighting tunnels that are underneath hospital compounds, command posts, Hamas command posts that are under hospitals and UN facilities, rockets being fired at our civilians. And by the way, numbers, 9,000 rockets, more than 9,000 rockets have been fired from Hamas at our civilians since the war started, and it's almost not spoken about because there are so many other things happening. So we're in this absurd situation where we, on a moral level, are compelled to distinguish between combatant and non-combatant, and we are trying to get the non-combatants out of the battlefield, right? We've been calling for 2 weeks and 3 days on local civilian population in Gaza, in the north, where the main focus of our operations is. Go south to safety, save yourself, save your family, and don't get left behind. And we've been doing that, and more than 800,000 Palestinians out of 1.1 million who are in the north have gone south and have done the right thing. There's still many people left. We've seen active efforts by Hamas to stop Palestinians from evacuating by putting up roadblocks, by confiscating vehicles, by using violence, by shooting and intimidating Palestinians. And it's clear to anybody with intellectual integrity, it's clear what's happening. We're trying to fight the enemy. Hamas is trying to hide behind civilians, and they are trying to create these mass casualty events and dramatic headlines around the world. And I've even seen it in Indian media with horrible images of rubble and destruction in India, and then the outcry, civilians are killed. Well, why are civilians killed? They are killed, sadly, after we have asked them to evacuate, and after Hamas, of course, have placed all of their infrastructure underneath the civilians. And this, in short, is the cynical battlefield that we find ourselves in. Not only are we fighting the enemy under and above ground, but we are also fighting, on another level, international public opinion and the very cynical use that Hamas does of Palestinian civilian lives.
But today, just moments ago, the Israeli, beg your pardon, the Hamas Ministry of Health, that the Hamas really, runs, has come out with the latest figures. It says that more than 10,000 civilians have died in Gaza till now. Who do you blame for these killings? And at the same time, there are several calls internationally saying that now is the time for a ceasefire. Do you agree? If not, then what do you think will bring a ceasefire, if not today, then in future?
Yeah, let's start from the end. A ceasefire will be when Hamas surrenders unconditionally, comes up out of their hiding places from beneath the civilians with their hands up, and then we will decide what we will do with them. And when they return all of the 242 hostages that they've taken, the Israelis that they've taken, when all of them are returned unconditionally, and when Hamas surrenders, then we can talk about a ceasefire. Until then, any ceasefire will only serve the interest of Hamas. And anybody calling on a ceasefire is really doing the dirty work or the legwork of Hamas. The end game here is to dismantle Hamas. That is the military objective. That is what we understand that we need to do. And I want to emphasize there is a direct link between the ability of Hamas to execute such a tremendous and brutal attack that they did on October the 7th and all of their underground complexes inside Gaza. Without these battalion headquarters and all of the tunnel infrastructure that they have, they wouldn't have been able to perform October the 7th. There's a direct link between these, and that is why we're going after the military infrastructure. Some people maybe find it difficult to understand what has one thing got to do with the other. Everything. Without their underground infrastructure, Hamas doesn't exist, and that is their center of gravity, and that is why we're going after it. Once we will finish to dismantle and the infrastructure and kill their commanders and capture their the equipment and really either flood the tunnels or fill them with other things or just prop them closed and wait for all of the terrorists to die, whatever comes first, we will find tactical solutions. But at the end of the day, that is the objective, because you have to understand. I think that you know it because you've visited some of the communities a year and something ago. I think you saw firsthand the communities, the blossoming, beautiful, peaceful communities surrounding the Gaza Strip, the different kibbutzim. By the way, the people who live in those kibbutzim are ardent supporters of a two-state solution. They are people who propagate peaceful solution with Palestinians. There are people who have Arab friends. There are people who have been advocating in Israeli politics and around the world for a political solution. And you know what's even more absurd? Many of these peace activists are now hostages in Gaza, which I think is, it's a totally different level of cynicism that you cannot even imagine if you thought about it before. But regarding these communities, we understand that there's no way for us to return to these communities that are now ghost towns unless we fundamentally change the security situation. We cannot have a reality, we cannot return to the reality of October the 7th, where there's an armed, heavily armed terror military on the other side of the border that will have the ability to plan and execute such an attack again. That will not happen. And that is the reason why we have to dismantle Hamas totally. Unfortunately, they're using civilians. And regarding the number of casualties, I have been urging international media since day one not to lend credibility to the numbers that are disseminated by the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health in Gaza. Why so? Because they serve Hamas purposes, and they are false, and they have been caught lying many times. One incident, the El Ahli hospital in northern Gaza, Hamas blamed us for firing at the hospital, and you may remember headlines of 500 dead civilians, 800
Yes.
civilians accredited to the Gaza Health Ministry, right? After that, when we did the investigation and debunked those lies and claims, it became clear. Not only was it not Israel that fired anything at the hospital, it was a rocket that landed there and exploded. And nobody has proven that a lot of people died in that incident. It was a propaganda fake by Hamas, and therefore anybody who's monitoring the situation in Gaza should not treat anything coming out of Hamas mouthpieces with any level of veracity, because
Right.
it's Hamas lies and just You know, where are all the 17 to 35-year-old men? Where's that category? Gaza is full of men. You watch BBC and Al Jazeera and other mouthpieces that promote Hamas directives. You see there's only young men on the streets. How come they aren't dying? Where is that segment of the population in the reports of the Gaza Health Ministry?
Jonathan, you mentioned the terror tunnels that are underneath Gaza. There's a lot of curiosity all across the globe about what these terror tunnels are all about. A year ago, I visited one of those tunnels, just next to the Gaza border. But uh, international military observers have been saying that one of the challenges for the IDF in the ground invasion, of obviously apart from the usual booby traps, etc., are these tunnels, terror tunnels, where from anywhere these terrorists can emanate. Uh, what is the plan really? How wide is this network? Could it take weeks and months for you to completely sanitize these tunnels?
The tunnels are a significant challenge, but what we're dealing with now, it's not so much the tunnels that you saw, the tunnels that infiltrate into Israel. They more or less, we've dealt with these by building an underground wall and by doing lots of preventive measures. And now it's less of an issue of them getting in. Now it's an issue of the fact that our troops are on the ground in Gaza. We're fighting in a densely populated and built up area. And you have to imagine that there's the Gaza above the ground, and then there's the Gaza below the ground. And there's an entire city and network of tunnels that Hamas has spent years on building, and many, many international resources they have spent on building this underground city under Gaza City, under Rafah, under Khan Yunis, and then tunnels connecting everything in between. That is where they are. That is where they live, and that is where they fight from. And that is the tactical challenge here. And as I know the Indian Army has also experienced when you dealt with tunnel warfare, subterranean warfare, and many other militaries have seen, it's a very challenging place to fight because a military cannot bring to use most of its advantages. And it basically boils down to a one-on-one fight. And usually a defender, i.e. here Hamas, will have many opportunities to prepare booby traps and IEDs and all kinds of nasty surprises. However, even though it is a challenging environment, to be down in a tunnel is not always a good thing, because if you are cut off from air, electricity, and water, then a tunnel becomes a death trap. So what we are going to do, and I won't go into too much tactical detail, we will find the ways to turn the tunnels, instead of an advantage for Hamas, to a liability and eventually their graves.
Finally, Jonathan, I want to ask you about the new reality that Israel often talks about creating in Gaza. That once the war is over, the third phase really will be a creation of a new reality. What is this new reality that will come into existence in Gaza? And I'm also curious to know, once the Hamas is eliminated, let's hope that at least in the Gaza territory that happens, what will happen after that? Will the territory be handed over to UN? Will there be peacekeeping force, or will there be the Palestinian Authority that will come into picture? And what assures you that just like before, the Hamas will not take over control forcibly yet again?
Yeah, very valid questions, and definitely super important, because at the end of the day, war is just another mean to implement policy, right? Israel is, I'm sure, thinking about that, and the strategic echelon, the cabinet and the government are for sure planning for that. What we are focusing now in the IDF is to create the conditions for that to happen. So we have to get Hamas off the battlefield, have to dismantle it, and make sure that they not only do not govern, but that they don't have any military ability to attack Israelis and to do the atrocities of October 7th again. You're right, you cannot kill an idea, and Hamas is also an idea. Extremist Islamism is an idea. Jihadi terrorism is an idea. It's a concept. And generations of Palestinians in Gaza have been brought up and educated or brainwashed under this idea of jihad, of martyrdom, of killing Jews, of eradicating Israel, of annihilating Israel. All of these Middle Ages concepts that unfortunately are thriving close to our borders, and there will be a lot of work to be done. Now, there are good examples in global history of places that were under tyrannical, horrible rule, Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, but there are other examples as well, who then transitioned into becoming global centers of productivity, prosperity, and peace. So it is possible. But the question is, what kind of buy-in will we be able to achieve, or what kind of investment will the international community be willing to do for the sake of the future of Gazans? Okay. From a security perspective, which is always the most important and the primal perspective, it's clear that Hamas cannot be able to exist the day after, and that we won't be able to allow that to happen. What will come in its wake? You mentioned two things. I think that they are less relevant, but that's only my point of view. And we will see, at the national level, what kind of solutions, what kind of creative solutions will be found. I think actually that it could be, if handled well, and if regional Arabic powers, regional Muslim countries, and other international players will see this as a good opportunity to really bring Gaza forward, to focus on the human potential, to educate for democratic values, to educate for prosperity, for tolerance, not for jihad and martyrdom and bloodshed and war and all of these horrible things that have been prevailing in Gaza for over so many years, but instead do the positive, then this could be a great opportunity. And maybe in 3 or 4 or 5 years, there will be a totally different Gaza, with investment being made in human capital and infrastructure that is designed to create prosperity and hope for the future, instead of what Hamas has been doing for over so many years, which is just investing in war and rockets and weapons and terrorists and all of the negative things, which bring only destruction to Gaza. So even though the situation now is horrible, I am hopeful, and I hope that at the end of the war, those positive things can be able to happen, so that this will be the last war between Israel and Gaza, and that in the future we will see cooperation, prosperity, respect, tolerance, and democracy on both sides of the border.
Jonathan, one last question before I let you go. I know you have a busy night ahead. What do you expect? What does Israel expect from countries like India? We've been close strategic partners. We have very robust military, intelligence, trade, and technology partnership. But there are two things that I've been in touch with the Israeli ambassador and the Israeli diplomats here. One, they've requested the Indian government that Hamas should be banned in India. Why do you think this is important? And secondly, he confirmed to me that Israel has asked India to send in over 100,000 workers to replace the Palestinian workers who've been working in Israel until the 7th of October terror attack happened. So what do you expect from India, and why are these things very critical to you?
I think it's a great opportunity for India to, and for other countries around the world, to take one more step forward. And as you said, there are many good developments between India and Israel. I think your great nation and our small nation, we are coming together, finding common ground, and looking at different opportunities to bring prosperity to our countries together, which is excellent. And I think that, every country should be clear on where it stands. You're either with Hamas, a genocidal jihadi terrorist organization, or you're with Israel. There is no in between, and it should be an easy choice for any democratic and peace-loving country. And I think that that needs to be said clearly, just like the Prime Minister of the UK, the President of France, the President of the United States, the Chancellor of Germany, and the Prime Minister of Italy, and many, many other leaders have come to Israel and shown their support and commitment and their support of the values and the right of Israel to defend itself. I think that's a very important statement to make. And as I said before, let's look at the positive. There are many opportunities that now present themselves, even in this dark hour of fighting and bloodshed and war. And hopefully, those opportunities will be leveraged by elected officials on both sides in order to do good for our two countries. I think it can serve Indian interests. I think it can serve Israeli interests. And there's many opportunities to be seized upon. One of them could be the workers, which I think would be a great source of income for many in India, and it would definitely provide a good solution for a need in Israel, something that I deal a little bit less with since it's not a military matter. But I think that there are
Right.
many opportunities that we should leverage. And I'm happy to see the developments over the last year of relations between Israel and India. It's in the right direction. I remember far or negative trends in the past. Now we see positive trends, and I think it is for the benefit of our two countries.
Well, here's hoping, Jonathan, that there is return of peace and end of terrorism, of course, and Jews can live peacefully side by
Indeed.
side and in the Jewish state of Israel. Thank you
Yes.
so much for joining
In-
us today.
Thank you.